All right, hello again. This is Moritz Bierling, Director of Research at Exosphere. And today I have with me another guest who I have known for a little bit now, quite over a year, I think. Her name is Urvi Bhandari. Hi.
Hi.
Great to have you on the show. So Urvi is a connector soul, in a sense. That's what I would say. When I went in research for this show back to her About Me page, it really said a connector of people, places, ideas, and things. And I like that kind of phrase, like bringing together the physical, the material, but then also the kind of more ephemeral. And just for a little bit more on her background, she has a BBA and an MBA from the, I think, Goizueta Business School. Is that correct?
Goizueta or Emory. A lot of people know it as Emory.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't. And yeah, so her specialties are mostly in the areas of business development, cultural change, women's leadership, and of course innovation. And I remember when I got to know you, you were still doing the Innovation Crush podcast,
Yes.
and you were working with Chris Denson. And I remember Skinner, our founder at Exosphere, appeared there, and you had a very good conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, so Urvi lives a nomadic lifestyle, which seems to be something that more and more educated people are gravitating towards, especially those who don't find opportunity in their native places, or don't find the opportunity all the time where they live. So when the opportunity moves around, people move around as well. And Urvi does that by helping businesses and individuals to increase their evolutionary potential through ideas and strategies. And we're going to talk about that later a little bit more. But her most recent stint was working at Sam's Club, where she filled the role of Director for Membership Innovation. And now she has a new project, Seam Seer. Tell us more about
that. So Seam Seer came out of, I've actually had the idea for probably a couple of years. I've always been interested in fashion. You know that I've been involved with the startup community and innovation, and I thought, why not bring fashion and technology together, right? It's something that is definitely already happening. There was an article this morning. Polo just released a athletic shirt that has a device that you put on your waist, and it'll record all your data and stuff like that, right? We've seen a lot of that in people doing betas, but somebody's actually now selling it.
Right.
And so for me, though, it was more beyond just, oh, I want to collect data. It was more about, I am a nomad, going back to that, right? I'm a nomad not because I'm going where opportunity is going. It's because I don't like to be in one place.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like being static. And I think we're brought up to think that we have to be static in one place, and we have to have a home, and we have to fill that house, and then have a family and all that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm more alive when I'm not static. And so that's where the nomad comes in. So when I thought about my own fashion sense, and I love clothes, but I don't like to travel with a big bag. I just want my backpack and a carry-on.
Right.
I could travel 2 months in one bag, and I've done it before. And I could go everything from a black tie to the beach, right? I had everything I needed, but it was probably a good 50-pound bag. I don't want to travel with 50-pound bag and my backpack. I want to travel even lighter. And I thought about clothes. I thought, there has to be a way you can take clothes and make them change color, make them, totally wrinkle-free, not worry about whether I have to wash it or not, for a while. Make it fit, right? So it has to fit me no matter whether I've gained weight or lost weight or whatever. It has to have function.
Yes.
As a nomad, I want my clothes to help me live my life. So I want it to cool me or heat me based on my temperature. I want it to have my boarding pass instead of me having to hold a phone and having a screen. And then fashion, right? So I want it to be fashionable no matter where I go.
Right.
So that's kind of the vision of Seam Seer, is to connect fashion and technology to do things that create fit, function, and fashion.
Right.
And so short term, we're not going to be able to incorporate all the technology, but there's a lot of textile technology that we could be incorporating into clothes for people.
Right. And
So
you're
that's
right.
kind of where that's coming from.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I really like the idea, and it's definitely a field that has some big potential. But right now,
Yep.
it's actually not too many people playing in this field, and so there's definitely
Nope.
opportunity there to get started early. And I see you've been focusing on researching a lot what people actually want, how things should combine well.
Yes.
Like, where are you at in this process?
So, any new company knows that you can have a great idea. And this actually comes from my marketing background. Is I actually started my marketing background, almost 20 years ago, when I started my career, I actually started in market research. Never wanted to stay in market research for the rest of my life, but it was critical as a marketer to understand data. And if you can understand data and translate it, you can be successful at anything. Right. But you have to know how to translate it, and you have to listen to the data. So a lot of people, when they come up with an idea, it's all about, ooh, I have this idea, and I want to do X, Y, Z.
Right.
Well, yes, there are other people who want what you are thinking about, but if you can't find a sustainable market for it, then you're not going to generate revenue. You're not going to be able to create a company. And so one of the first things we did is we actually sent out a survey. So we're looking at different lines, and I'm not going to get into what we're looking into, but we did send out a survey for the initial line to the target market to say, what are your true pain points? What are things that you're not thinking about that could actually help you? What are the things that you currently use to solve problems, whether known or unknown problems, but really honing in on what is it that people are even seeing as problems? Because there may be things that we're looking at and we're defining that the market's not even paying attention to it because there's nothing to solve it.
Right.
So that, as a marketer, as a person who's going to create a product, that actually tells me that sometimes I may actually have to make sure that the problem gets defined first for people so that our product actually makes sense for it. So sometimes you have to define a problem so that you can actually sell something, because people are not thinking about it, which is, that in itself is marketing too.
Yes. And you picked up a good point there, that people get overly attached to the ideas that they started out with instead of kind of seeing that as a seed and then developing into something more, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good lesson to learn. Like I definitely started also in that way. Like, okay, I'm going to solve the education problem, and then you start. Okay, that's a little bit big. Maybe I should cut it down first, and then go from there and learn on the way. And so over the years, you actually gain clarity where before you had vision, and then you build on that.
Well, and another good part of another good thing to think about when you're starting a business is a couple of things. One is find partners. So I have a great business partner, and she has a different background than me.
Right.
And it's amazing because I am very visionary, and I kind of see the future. And like you said, you say education, or I say fashion and technology, and we're thinking way over here. But to get there, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
And she's been really good about bringing me back to, okay, but here are the details that we have to work on now. Here is, let's collectively think about, how do we create something that can work right now and generate revenue that may not be our end goal, right? It may not be that visionary product that we thought about, but it gets our name out there. It gets a particular product out there that may solve a very small little problem, and slowly build that up. So one is finding partners that complement you, but yet your vision and kind of the reasons that you're doing it are similar, and that's very important. But yes, number two is going back to what we were talking before, which is find out what your market wants, right? Know what it is that you can actually sell before you do anything. And number three is, it's okay to say that you're going to start here and then end up doing something a little bit or totally different for the first iteration, right? I mean, it's going back to MVP. We talk about MVP all the time, and it is okay to continue to iterate on that.
Right. Yeah, but you touched really on that important point that success or like doing anything worthwhile takes a lot of time. And in the current kind of startup culture, this point is, I think, hugely underappreciated, because we have this I don't know, this unusual convergence of lots of available money and lots of technology hype, and that comes together to this expectation that any new idea must be realized within a year and already produce lots of changes and disrupt things in order to be valuable.
Right.
And actually, Skinner and I, founder of Exosphere, and myself, we recently appeared on this podcast called the School Sucks Podcast, and exactly there we had the same conversation, but in the field of education, that people, even in that alternative education space, who understand the criticisms of the current system in education, they either write a lot and don't take anything to the next step, actually doing things, or when they do that, they kind of start, as I said, like want to change education instead of saying, okay, I'm going to solve this problem and then I'm going to go from there. So nobody's really taking this this responsibility seriously for creating long-standing solutions to problems, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I mean, I'm a, what is it called? I have done that too, where I think so broad, and this company is probably the first time I'm looking at something, okay, can I create something a little bit more sustainable? Now, at the end of the day, you know, again, that's why I said you have to find partners who are doing it for the same reasons, right? Because both my partner and I are very passionate about other things also. And one of the main things that we're passionate about is helping others.
Right.
And so creating capital for yourself so that you can help others is important. And then for me personally, and I think you and I have talked about it before, is I'm very passionate about my floating cities, right? Is building those cities on ships that go around the world.
I was going to ask you anyways.
Like me, yeah, I know. So nomads like me can have a home that goes with them, right? That is what drives me day in and day out, is that nomad part of me, which the only way I can even get that to happen is to build something sustainable for myself, to build capital, which then I can help others, but then I can also help build a greater project. That is what I'm passionate about. And the other thing is that you have to, I will say this, for somebody like me who is very big picture, you have to pick a company that you're going to build sustainably that you're interested in, right? So it was very interesting to me that I've had many folks come along the way, and they have great ideas, and I get excited for them and they want me to join. But I don't, because that's not what I'm interested in. So yes, I could do the business part of it for you, but if I'm not going to be engaged in it, then I'm probably not going to give 100%, right? Same thing with the corporate world. When, you know, I'm in a role in today's day and age, if I'm in a role, I want to make an impact. I want to be engaged with my work. I don't just want a paycheck. Yes, could I do the job? There are jobs that I could do. But if I'm not going to be engaged with the work, I'm not going to do it. And that's okay with me, because I'm not driven by the job or the paycheck. I'm driven by making an impact, doing what I believe in, and being engaged with my work. Because if you're not engaged with your work, then you're wasting your days. Absolutely, actually. Right.
And yet it often is very difficult for people to get started with something they really care about. And that's another thing where I find the approaches to be lacking often, where we kind of expect people to put their cards all on the first hand, so to speak, and like go all out, instead of building towards that life of following your passion or doing your thing by taking normal jobs or jobs that get you closer to that, and then doing those things in the spare time and connecting to people, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think people, But here's the thing, what's amazing about our environment today, right? So I look at graduating from college, college a little bit less than 20 years ago, right? And the environment was not there that I could just find stuff that I was passionate about.
Right.
Which, though I did, one of my first jobs was going into the fashion industry. So in some ways I did find an industry that I liked.
Funny how that
and I was doing market research in fashion, not very glamorous, but hey, I learned a lot, right? And so, but today there is, you have so many options, so many smaller companies, so many, whatever it is, that you could go into whatever you wanted to get into. Now, if you're driven by making money, then no, you don't have a lot of options, because
Right.
then you're going to have to either go the path, or you're going to have to be that unicorn that's going to make a lot of money in your business. Or, I mean, I talk to people who are in their 40s and 50s who started a business in their 20s or 30s. And they're just getting to the point where, they're not in the media or anything like that, but they started companies. They put their own money in. 16 years later, guess what? They have a pretty good life because they're sustaining themselves, right? It doesn't have to be that you have to make the big money when you're in your 20s or 30s. Like, it takes a lot of, like, I love this one ad that I saw. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was like, it was a hotel ad, and it said, an overnight success doesn't happen overnight, right?
Yes,
And it
years in the
talks
making.
about, it's years in the making. And it was, I mean, granted, as people who are entrepreneurs, we're not staying in hotels a lot, and especially in today's day and age of Airbnb and couch surfing and friends and family, you're not spending whatever money on a hotel. But the whole point was, an overnight success is not an overnight success. That person has put in a lot of time and effort and given up things that maybe other people are not willing to give up. And that's a choice each entrepreneur makes.
Right. Was there ever a point in your life where, like, you made a very conscious decision to pursue a particular path instead of going down a different one? Like, where you really thought, okay, I'm going to do this and not this?
Yeah, I would say, and it's going to be different than what most people think. So I was in corporate America for 17 years when 2.5 years ago, I made a choice to go on sabbatical. And I was in the prime of my career. I could have continued, going up the ladder. But honestly, I'd gotten to a point of, I was rethinking, why am I in corporations? I need to decide, who am I? What am I? I still enjoy working in corporations where I can help other people think differently.
Right.
And that is why I still look at roles in corporations if they come along. But at 2.5 years ago, I was starting to really think about, well, what am I really doing? I'm not sure. I knew that the nomad was finally starting to get defined, right? I've always been a nomad, and I realized that because I've lived in most places 2 or 3 years of my life. That's it. The average is about 2 to 3 years. In my 20s, I stayed one place for about 4 years. Dallas was my base for about 6.5 years, but I was barely there. I was always traveling. So that part of me was starting to get defined a little bit more, and I wasn't matching my career, so to say, with it. So yes, I made a very conscious decision to walk away and kind of rethink my life. But I did it with a lot of support. One is the people in my life, right? They supported me. But number two, I had already gained experience working.
Yes.
I knew that I had that business acumen. I knew that I had built up a network. I knew that I had some interests. Maybe I hadn't defined them, but I knew that there was a lot to work with, and I wasn't just doing it on a whim. It took me 4 years to actually take the sabbatical. I knew 4 years prior to the sabbatical, I was going to go on a sabbatical, and I put everything in order, whether it was finances, building up a support system, getting involved with the right type of people and communities. And so when I took that sabbatical, I had my moments, low moments of figuring out, what am I doing?
Yes.
But it was a conscious decision.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't. Now, granted, unlike most people, I don't have a lot of responsibility. It's just me.
Right.
No spouses, no children, none of that. So it's a different perspective. But I think the process of every single person understanding what their priorities are and then defining those and then making decisions based on that have to be done.
Right. And it's so easy to fall into a rut and kind of just into a rhythm that naturally establishes itself, be it based on the corporation's work cycle or whether it's on your home life. And that's where I really found it very valuable to start journaling, which sounds weird when you first think about it. But when I do this every morning, and so in that time, like it sometimes takes me an hour or two even, and I bring out everything that I have on my mind and like think about, okay, what happened yesterday? What am I going to do today? How does this compare to what I experienced in the past? These kind of things. And then through that, it's kind of like actually recalculation of my path, like orienting myself in time and space. What happened before and now where am I going to go? And that kind of allows me to be very flexible, very adaptable, and also keep kind of a running memory, so to speak, of what do I want to do and what did I already accomplish?
That's awesome. It's interesting you talk about, I know a lot of people journal, and I think I do it in a very different way. It's actually something I've probably been doing that I can consciously remember since I was probably in the 6th grade.
Wow.
But I do it very differently. It's not a day-to-day thing. Every probably 3 or 4 months, I will write. I will write in a book. I still do this on paper, and they're usually very nice journals. And over the years, I've kept them. And interestingly enough, a lot of times it'll happen when there's something very intense going on. So sometimes it's actual writing. If it's finances, it's actually putting out my finances on a piece of paper.
Right.
Sometimes it's just, let me think about who am I today and trying to describe myself or, things like that. And that's my way of, like you said, kind of looking at stuff and then recalibrating and then going forward. But a lot of times putting it on a piece of paper helps you manifest it, right? Yes. They talk about putting things into the world. And what we don't realize is it doesn't matter how much we think it. Sometimes we have to verbalize it. And maybe it's not verbalizing it to another person,
right.
Even to yourself, seeing what you've written, writing it out, letting it come out of your, so to say, system and kind of talking more energy and existential. But it really works because I think what it does is psychologically, it motivates you. Because when it's in your head, but I don't think it motivates you enough. But once you put it out there, it actually motivates you. And so I've enjoyed doing that because I think that's what helped me 4 years prior to going on sabbatical was actually at that point, I probably was only doing it twice a year, but it was still writing it down and finally making it happen. And felt really good when I made it happen.
Yeah, I recently watched a video of this psychologist from Canada who got into trouble for standing up to some people who were complaining about his denial to use their preferred pronouns. And it's a quite controversial subject because like the transgender people.
Right.
Do you remember that, Jordan Peterson? And not really, I wasn't really interested in that part of his story, but more about his view on free speech, where he's talked about how he doesn't know what he thinks until he actually articulates it and puts it into writing. So without doing that work of putting it into physical form, it's very difficult to actually know what you really think because you haven't actually thought it through. But I want to switch gears here a little bit because
absolutely.
Over the years, you've tried a bunch of different roles and fields, but do you still remember what was your first job?
So let's see. I think my first job was a teaching assistant at Emory. Because, I consider that first job. If we want to talk about first full-time job, then yes, my first full-time. I'd done internships before that too. But my first full-time job was actually at McCann Erickson, India. And I was kind of like an account manager. And I had actually asked the managing director of the organization that since this is my first job, can I get exposure to one project in every single field? And so over the year and a half, I had a project in PR. I had a project working for a client. I remember my client was L'Oreal India at the time. I had an account executive that I worked for, so I got to do all the running around and paperwork. And so I did PR. I worked with the team in creative. I learned a little bit about media. We actually developed one of the first kind of animated greeting cards for India at the time, because this was like 1999 or 2000, so very early on in email. But it was a lot of fun because I got exposure. I think even at that age, which I think is kind of coming back to the statement that you read from my profile, which is connector, right? Even at that time, I was doing multiple things because I could connect different things together. So for me, in many ways, I'm kind of like a jack of all trades versus focusing on one thing. But if I had to say I was focusing on certain things, it's marketing, branding, and innovation.
Right, right. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, you already hinted at this as well at the beginning, but do you have some kind of, I don't know, set of values or ideas that guide you through your journey? Or do you kind of, as you said, like every couple of months or maybe every year or so, reorient yourself and then like take the next shot into a different direction?
I think there's two things to that. I think when it comes to morals and values, yes, I do have a value system. The value system hasn't changed. The value system, I mean, one of the top things of the value system is never to hurt other people, right? And in the process, if I do, I try to apologize for, whatever needs to be done. But more so than not, I'm not necessarily, I mean, that's just part of who I am. But usually my decision making is based on what is right for me without hurting other people. And so taking the leap of faith for doing the sabbatical, right? If I had had other responsibilities, it may have been a little bit different. I may have still done it, but it may have had to be done a little bit differently. Each step that I've made, to be honest, a lot of times, at least in the beginning of my career, I would make decisions because my gut said it was right.
I knew you were a gut person.
Without knowing how it would help me later, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So here's like one of the first examples is that when I was in between, I was in like 9th or 10th grade, we moved to India, right? I had grown up in the US school system. I actually had the opportunity to go to a very good Indian private school when we moved to India, or have the choice of going to the American school of Bombay, right? I actually chose the American school. And I mean, one of the main reasons is because the Indian school had uniforms and I didn't want to wear uniforms. I mean, this is a, ninth grader thinking about my future, right? And my parents have been very good about always giving me the option to think through my decisions, but also know that you have to face whatever consequences on whatever decision you make.
That's great. That's great.
So yes, I didn't go to the Indian school, and I could have made some amazing contacts and things like that for the future today. However, the American school was very important to me too, because I knew that I would probably come back to the States to go to college. And at the end of the day, from that perspective, it is kind of easier if you have an American degree, right? Even if it's not from here, it's an American degree. You understand the system. High school preps you to go into college, all those kinds of things. And so I was kind of looking at those things. Now, I didn't know if that would help me or not, but it was a decision I made. And It was a decision I made as a 9th grader. So it's those kinds of things that you kind of, you have to weigh all the options. You have to look at all that, but you make a decision sometimes based on gut. And, and that's the other thing. You talk about value system or how I make decisions. Yes, I do listen to my gut, but it's not like I listen to my gut and then decisions made. There's a lot of, kind of what you were talking about, the professor talk, or the psychologist, that sometimes you have to write things to actually even articulate what's in your brain. Sometimes I've had to ask myself the questions, why am I feeling a certain way? Why is my gut telling me I should make XYZ decision? And then going backwards, analyzing it, and then making a decision. And taking other people's perspectives, right? And especially people who have a very different view than you, or people you may not know, right? Not that they're going to necessarily use that decision, but it makes your mind think a little bit more on why you're making whatever decision you're making.
Right, and puts it in context and perspective, right?
Absolutely. People know, my friends know. I'll talk to strangers. I will talk to strangers all the time. So nobody's a stranger to me. And if something is actually going on in my life where I am in that decision-making process, I'll talk to them about it. I mean, these are people who don't know me from, anything. And I don't know them, but it's interesting to put it in front of them and see how they react and see if they have a different perspective so that I get a bigger view of the picture. That's why I love collaboration. I love collaboration because guess what? I don't have all the answers, but I know if you put people together, each builds upon each other, and you have something even better, right? There are certain people that are geniuses, but I think a lot of us love having different perspectives, putting those together, and then saying, where's it going to go?
Right. Yeah, and also everybody does have a value system, but most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's not actually articulated, or it's not on the conscious level. So it does definitely help to kind of bring that to the forefront and make it a conscious decision to actually follow it, and not simply follow your parents or your culture's assumptions, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I guess that's the first step really for millennials today, also to start thinking about what to do because we have so many options, we have so many opportunities, and that often is the most arresting or paralyzing because you don't know how to choose, right? So in order to start that process, you have to kind of forefront what actually influences your decision, then cut out all the things you are definitely not willing to do, and then you can start making some decisions on where to start. And with the knowledge, though, that it's not going to be a final decision and not going to be determining the rest of your life. So in that sentiment, like, what would be your, not maybe advice, maybe not, but like, what would be your message to like millennials starting out now to define for themselves what they want to do with their lives and how to get started in their professional life?
It's actually a very hard question to answer. I kind of think back sometimes and I think, okay, what if I were a millennial, right? What would I do? Because you're right. There's so much information out there, right? Everything is at our fingertips. The fact that we're having this conversation.
Right, and that's a new problem, actually. That didn't exist before.
Exactly. It is actually a new problem because if you keep seeing the media saying this is doing well, this person made money, this person, and it's like, oh, the entrepreneurial way is the way, then, and everybody thinks they're going to go that way when we all know that only a certain percentage are actually going to be in the media. There is a greater percentage of people who are actually doing well. It's just that it's not in the media.
Yes.
Right? But everyone's trying to be that multi-billionaire. And it's like, I would say one is understand what's realistic, first of all, right? What is realistic for you and what are your priorities and what's your timeline? If somebody were to ask me, well, I guess I kind of have an answer, but when people ask me like, oh, what's your, what are your next what's your 5-year plan? I look at people and I'm like, I'm not answering that question. Because guess what? I got this far and none of it went according to a plan.
Right.
It went this way and that way. And whether it's personal or professional, whatever it was, there was no plan. I mean,
right. Planning is useful, but following it to the detail is not.
It doesn't work, right? So, and the reason I say I kind of have an answer is because, like, we talk about 20 years as my floating cities, but that's a 20-year project. I'm 4 years in. I think, okay, I have 16 more years to go. But even when I say a 20-year plan, it's not that that's going to be I'm not going to have the finished product in 20 years. Right. It's in 20 years, I want to be on it. I want it to be manifested somehow, some way, I don't think even I know what that manifestation is yet. What does it really look like?
Right.
I know I have the idea. I know I have the concept. I know there's a sentiment that I have about it. So I think one of the things, going back to kind of simplifying it, is one is just figure out yourself. What really matters to you? I mean, what do you want from life? What, are you trying to experience the journey of life? Or is it you want to make money because you want to be famous? Or, whatever it is. And it could be different things for different people.
Yes.
And it is, whatever it is, it's right for you. Don't compare yourself against others. As a Gen X, it took me probably till about last year where I stopped. Now, if I'm comparing for like literally a moment, and then I'm just like, whatever. This is my life. I can't be comparing. Why should I compare? So figure out who you are. Prioritize what you're looking for in life. Never have more than like 2 or 3 things, because if you go more than that, you'll get overwhelmed. So again, you'll have paralysis of decision making. And focus, right? Focus and discipline. Yes. I mean, I can tell you that even for me, focus and discipline has been one of the things that I think I've done it from a high level, but not on a particular project, right? So Seam Seer is probably my way of, okay, focus on discipline. I'm going to do Seam Seer. I am not going to do 10 things.
Yes.
There are things that I have been doing for the past couple of years that are not going away, right? So a couple of years ago, I started real estate development. I started studying that. I still study it. I still read about it. I still understand where it's going, but I'm not necessarily trying to do a project today.
Yeah.
Because real estate development can take about 10, 12 years before you actually make something out of it. And so all those other things that I've done don't go away. They all become part of my experience. And again, the connector, I will bring all the pieces together as my journey keeps going, because the journey is there. It's a long journey. You better enjoy it.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful last word. And just from my side also, I will recommend people who are watching this either on the live stream or as a video to check out also the future authoring course, which this psychologist that I mentioned earlier put out, where you go through an exercise of basically bringing out what you have inside and then making that visible to yourself. I will link that in the description below. And then I will also link my personal productivity post that I posted on my personal website, where I list my daily routine and my kind of random productivity tips, which are not necessarily about productivity, but more about like, okay, I want to do something. How do I go about doing it? What helps me in achieving that, right? And then I will also link in the podcast, also link in the show description, the School Sucks podcast episode that Skir and I talked about, where you can learn more about what Exosphere is up to. And then as a last thing, I would also like you to take a moment and complete the survey that I have in the show notes. It's a survey about the 21st century perspective on emerging tech and work. And we are trying to find out really how people think about this current professional environment and how they approach it. So if you take just 5 minutes, complete that, we will be very happy and thankful, and we will be able to provide a much better service to people in the future. So thanks, Urvi, for being on the show. I really had a lot of fun.
Thanks, Moritz. Same here. I'm glad we got to do this.
Yes, and then I will talk to you soon, and goodbye.
Sounds good.